Okay, we are speeding. So, my guest today is Marla Bedrosian. Full disclosure, we met when I was in California on a family vacation, and I knew right away that I wanted to talk to her and have her on the show. So, Marla has always loved wine. She came by it organically. She was in the hospitality industry, working with hotels up and down the East Coast. And she started learning about wine from the sommeliers at the hotel restaurants. And that interest eventually grew. She and her husband, who are confirmed New Yorkers, decided they were going to do something a little crazy. They were going to leave the stability of corporate America to become farmers and the owners of a boutique winery in California. She's the mother of 3 grown children. She's a new grandmother to twin baby girls, and she doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Marla, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, you have such an interesting story, and I want to jump into the wine stuff in a minute, but I'd like to get to know kind of where you came from so we can understand how you got to where you are. So, talk about where you grew up, your education, and how you got into your first major career, which was the hospitality industry.
Sure. So, I grew up in a suburb of New York City and born and raised, and by a very modest middle-class family, and then went off to college in upstate New York at Albany, which is where I met my husband, and started out in college thinking I was going to become a doctor, and very quickly realized it was not the right path for me to take. So I had already been in school for about 2 years and needed to figure out a path quickly. So what was the other option? Graduate on time and become a psychology major. And I will say that many of the courses that I took for psychology incredibly helped me for what I was headed for in the future, just in terms of learning and understanding how to interact with people, how to understand people, and just the psychology that goes into business and creating teams and working with people around you. I graduated college and moved back down towards New York City. And actually, I'm going to step back for a second. My final summer before I graduated college, I worked for a small all-suite hotel in Westchester County, also a suburb of New York City. And there I found what I was looking for and really didn't know what I wanted to do career-wise before that. But I believe that it was the moment that Luther Vandross checked into the hotel and I was working behind the front desk, and I knew that this was where I needed to be.
That might encourage somebody, right?
And listen, I learned how to make beds. I learned how to do housekeeping. I learned how to be a switchboard operator.
You did it all.
I did it all. And it was great. It was a great experience. Went back to college, knew that I wanted to somehow explore the hotel business, and became very, very close to a gentleman who was the chief counsel at the company that I had been working for. And he did something that he doesn't normally do, nor does he feel comfortable with. And that is introducing a young person to senior friends of his, colleagues that also worked for some major hotel companies in New York City. And he even said to me, I'm really going out on the line here. I don't usually do this. I don't like to make these connections unless I'm certain. And he did. And I interviewed at a few companies, and I chose to work for a company at the time called Princess Hotels. Started right after I graduated college and spent the next 25 years there.
So that was a really long career. I mean, that was a stable career. You moved up. I was a psychology major as well, and I totally agree with you that really can help you in any industry, right? In terms of understanding people and figuring people out. So part of your journey, and I love this about you, you said when you first started, working in the hotels, you really didn't know a lot about wine. You were kind of simple, a white Zinfandel girl. And then as things went along, you started to get to know people who worked in the management of the kitchen and the restaurants in the hotels, and you learned about wine. Talk about that.
So my role actually for the next 25 years was a variety of different roles, but they all involved sales. Whether I was leading a sales team, overseeing a sales office, but the heart and soul of working in the hospitality industry are the guests that come into the hotel. So as part of that, I spent a lot of time on property and with all different teams and all different departments, learning and just being a part of it all. And my story really with wine started in Bermuda, and it was in the early 90s. And I used to have to go to Bermuda on business trips, twist my arm. And I met this gentleman. His name was Ellis, and he was the somm at the Waterlot Inn. And I remember ordering my first dinner there, and he came over with this like 15 bottles of wine that were open and said, I suggest you have this wine and a glass of this with this, and you can taste this. And I was really, okay, I'll taste that. And I liked it. But I really enjoyed the stories behind each of the wines he talked to us about. And that friendship really grew. And that friendship grew into a spot where he would invite me down at 5:00 when he was opening wine. Whenever I was down on property, he'd say, come on down, I'll tell you about the wines that I'm opening. And it very, very quickly became a passion for me. And it wasn't about just the way the wine made me feel, but it was the stories behind them. And he really ignited my interest in the wine business. And something that I haven't shared with you before is that when I did finally start making wine, I want you to know that Ellis and I had stayed in touch for years. And I told him about all my wine journeys and all of these places I had visited working for the hotel company that I was with. And he always wanted to know where I was and what I was tasting. And he was one of the first people I reached out to when we started making wine. And I would like to say, and it's a fact, that the very first restaurant our wines ever were placed on was the Waterlot Inn in Bermuda because of Ellis. And our wines were sent to Bermuda, and there they sat, and it was a 360
full circle moment. Yeah.
360 degrees for me.
You know, I think a lot of us who do enjoy wine, we don't really know a lot about it, right? We just look at the price because that's what most people think of, whether you're in a restaurant or a grocery store or a wine store. What are some of the most surprising things about wine that you think people don't know and should know?
So I think that two things that I would point out to you that I think are confusions in the wine industry. And just talking about California for a second, people who come out to California and they go to the wine industry, they all think they're going to Napa. And they say, I'm going to come and visit you in Napa. And I have to say, but I'm not in Napa, I'm in Sonoma. Sonoma is on the complete opposite side of the mountain range than Napa. And Napa County has done a fantastic job of marketing themselves like Band-Aid, that if you're going to wine country, you must be going to Napa. So I think that that's like a little bit of a miscommunication. And even my closest friends will say, can I come visit you in Napa? So it's just something that I continue to try to educate people on. And the other thing too is this whole Chardonnay thing of I hate Chardonnay. And I don't understand it because Chardonnay is the most neutral fruit. And so how can you just hate that? And so I start asking people, why do you hate Chardonnay? And they tell me their reasons. And
It's got a bad rap, maybe? I don't know.
I would like the whole world to know that Chardonnay does not have to be an oak bomb. And it all depends on what you've been drinking. And I actually have fun sharing our Chardonnay with people who tell me they hate Chardonnay because they take a sip of it, they look at me and they say, I hate Chardonnay, but I actually like this. I mean, that's the same sentence.
So you convert them.
I do like to convert people to maybe having a glass of Chardonnay once in a while.
Something different.
Yes.
So now let's start with your journey to where you are today. So you guys you and your husband continued to work your corporate jobs on the East Coast in New York City. Your kids all live on the East Coast, so you're East Coast people, but you were vacationing back and forth to California. Where did this idea come from to say, okay, we're just going to buy a winery? I mean, how did that start?
So it was many years of visiting wineries all over the world. And it was many, many trips out here to both Sonoma and Napa. And there were experiences that we had at specific wineries. And I remember one so clearly. It was a small boutique family-owned winery. And he took us downstairs into this like barrel room in a basement. And there was this beautiful Labrador retriever that was sitting next to me. And there were hoses on the floor because they were, pumping out wine. And he poured us these wines and they were so beautiful. And he told us the story about how his family started in the wine business and how we're in his home. And I'll never forget. And if you were to ask Jeff the same story, he would tell you the same question. He would tell you the story. That was the aha moment for us visiting that winery where we both said, we could do this someday. And listening to this gentleman and the passion that he had for his family and the people around him and the community and crafting something that bring people into such good times, it was really inspiring for us. And we took many trips back and forth, and that one always really stuck out in our minds. And the stories of when we went to Burgundy, going into people's homes and meeting the owners and having them tell us about their trials and tribulations with farming. And as many of them were trials, we were getting more and more excited. And so it was back in 2010 during a vacation out here where I asked Jeff, where do you think someday we might retire to? And his comment was here, of course. And I'm like, okay, but nobody's here. And he said, no, but we are. This is where we're most present. You and I, this is where we're the happiest. And he shared a story about me leaving the San Francisco airport and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. And in those 40 minutes, he watched me transform into a very calm wine country person. And
very different from New York, right? Very different from the freneticism.
Yep. He said the New York City came right out of you. So it was in 2010 when California was still in a recession. Excuse me.
It's okay.
It was in 2010 when California was still in a recession and New York was out of the recession. And my husband had done quite a few real estate transactions here. He's a real estate guy. And some of them was selling a portfolio of vineyards for a public company. And he kind of became known as the wine guy. And he spent a lot of time out here working with vineyard management companies and also with wineries. And so he likes to say that he knew enough to be dangerous and he knew what was under the hood. And in 2010, when we were out here and we knew that a lot of these vineyards had just, the recession was still in place, but they had also gone through a 3-year drought. And there was quite a few vineyards that were for sale, whether they were bank sales or people were subdividing their property. So we decided at that time, let's just take a look and see if we could find a piece of property that perhaps the selling of the fruit could offset the farming costs, taxes, and what have you. And if we could, that's great. We've now secured a piece of property where someday we could put a house on and retire to. It didn't take long for us to find our estate property, which is Vineyard 11 in Windsor, California. And we purchased the property. We actually purchased it in 2011. And the funny story that goes with that is no one knew except for our 3 children. And it became our family secret. It was very, very well protected. And the reason why is we did not want to hear what our friends and family would say. You bought a vineyard in Sonoma County, but you live in New York, because people would think we were crazy. But we just knew in our hearts that we could make something out of this vineyard and we would figure it out.
And you did. And tell us the name of the vineyard. And you eventually transitioned, right, from being kind of bi-coastal to this is where we live. This is what we do.
Right. So the name is Vineyard 11. We have 11 acres of Pinot Noir planted. And we did put a house on it sooner than we thought, which is typical for me. So it was important for us to have our kids feel like they had a second home. And we wanted them to be connected to the land. It was hard to get them to come out there if there wasn't a place for us to stay, and we'd be eating all of our meals in our barn. And my kids were like, "Mom, we need a room." So we did. We decided to build a home in 2013. Both Jeff and I stayed with our careers in New York City, and we farmed from a distance. We had a great vineyard management team that took care of the property. And it was in 2014, unfortunately, when we found out that we had a virus in the vineyard, one of those moments where, let's just call that a trial. And somebody was trying us, like, how do we have a vineyard in a virus in our whole vineyard? Unfortunately, the only cure is to rip out the whole vineyard. So we did do that we started to rip out the vineyard in 2017. We had talked about maybe making small lots of wine throughout, and it was interesting to me. I think my husband was much more passionate about it, but it was interesting to me. And it wasn't until we started ripping out the vineyard at a barbecue behind our house, and I was still living in New York City at the time, that we decided to say, hey, if we're going to make wine, we need to start now. And the reason behind that is because as we were ripping out the vineyard, our vineyard was good enough to make rosé. So we knew that if we had started with the old, and before we ripped it out, we made our first vintage of rosé, Shoshana Rosé, who's named for our daughter, then we could bridge into the new the following year because we had kind of systematically replanted the property. So there we were, Domaine de la Rivière, meaning vineyard on the river. It was conceived that evening. And in 2017, we released our first wines.
So you went from being, pretty stable and comfortable, right? In corporate America, you've got your 401k, you've got your days off, all of that. And now you're an entrepreneur. So what was that transition like for you?
Well, the funniest part of the transition was I never really believed I had it in me to be an entrepreneur. I always believed that I needed to work for someone and they needed to give me a paycheck. And exactly what you just said, I had a 401k. I never truly visioned that I would be doing what I'm doing on my own. And every day I'm surprised at how much I have accomplished and how many pivots I've had to make along the way. But we do it. And we figure out a way to get whatever is done in that roadblock out of our way. And I think that the most valuable part of all of this for me has been to be the kind of mother to my kids where they have watched how hard I have worked for everything I've achieved. And one of the lessons I think that I'm most proud of, there's so many things I'm proud of with my kids, but one of the things I feel very comfortable with is they didn't watch me do things on my own. I was never successful on my own. I was always really good at finding people, the right people to surround myself with so that I could get a job done. And I see it in all three of them now, the way that they surround themselves with the right people to get a task done. And as a woman in the 90s, early 2000s, raising three children in the industry at the time was really a man's industry, hospitality. Being that person, that woman, that mother to pave the way for other mothers and start a trend in 1995 that my company of men allowed me to work at home 2 days a week was something that the women that came behind me, the women that I hired, those that worked with me and for me, I used to say to them, just wait, you're going to be so happy that I figured out how to navigate and be successful as a mother and also as a professional.
Absolutely. I mean, my mother was a lawyer. She went to law school in the 70s when she had young children. So I don't remember ever thinking I couldn't do something, right? But not everybody gets that message. And it's really important to model that. And it sounds like you've done that. This brings me to a really important question. When we are building our careers and our lives, life still goes on, right? And so you've mentioned multiple times you have 3 kids, adult children. They're on the East Coast. You now have 2 twin granddaughters. And how do you navigate that? I know your sons, right, are involved in the winery. So that probably helps you guys stay connected.
Sure. So all of my kids have careers of their own. However, the winery is a second job. And I shouldn't really call it a second job because it is very important to them. So our oldest son, who's the one who just had the babies, he is very involved in winemaking and in vineyard management. And our life has now shifted now that we have two babies and he lives on the East Coast. However, his plan is to be back in Sonoma May through the end of harvest every year with his family. And we're so lucky because he married someone who is fully on board with that. And she actually is also now a mother who can also work from home. So that works out well. And we also, our other son who lives in Miami, also he oversees all of our strategy and social media and communications. And he's just brilliant because he is, but he's also young. And I think that it's so important for me, as I tell everyone I'm only 36, but I am in my 50s. I think it's really important for anyone to stay relevant and to stay. It is so important to know what is going on with technology, figure it out on your own. And don't have somebody just figure out your phone for you. You're going to have to do it yourself. And the more you stay relevant, what you're doing is you're actually staying relevant to your customer and to the people that come in and see you. And my kids really help me still stay relevant. I learn from them every single day. And I'll be the first to tell them that. But my kids, my two boys will be completely involved in the winery. We couldn't do it without them. I do run the business every day. I manage the Domaine de la Riviere on a day-to-day basis. But I reach out to family members, and we also have some teams around us that will help in at certain times of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a real family business. And that's when I went on that trip, we met several families like yours who had started wineries, were managing wineries. And it was pretty amazing to see the family involvement, you know, in that type of a business. I didn't realize it was such a family business. So many women, Marla, at this point in our lives, in their 50s, feel like they don't have another chapter, that maybe they're not as relevant as they used to be. They've left a long time career. They're trying to figure out their place in the universe. And they feel maybe unseen or unworthy in a way that they shouldn't because they have accomplished so much. What kind of advice would you give women who are feeling that way and, you know, really would like some transformation, would like another chapter?
So the first thing I would say is call me on the phone because I will spend an hour with you. And I do have so many of my customers and colleagues that I previously worked with when I was in the hotel side of the business. There is so much out there. There is so much we can do. And what are you interested in? Do you want to go bike riding? Do you want to lead tours? I have a friend who she left the hotel business and she knows everything about every tree in Sonoma County. And I said to her, why are you not doing those tours through those woods? And she said, that is a really good idea. And, you know, as we get older and as you want to do something in your life that is it's more important for you to be passionate about it than how much money you're making, then find what you like and then let yourself navigate through your likes and you'll find a community around you. We're living in a time where there's so much available to us, things that we never would have had 20 years ago.
Like podcasting.
Exactly. I mean, look at you, right? And you are doing the same thing. You have pulled your previous experiences and you're now opening up the door for other women because of what you're able to do, right? And I just think that we all have that in us. And even if you want to go and bake brownies and sell them, do it. But you know, it's I think that everyone when you leave a job and you're so comfortable and then you say what's next, you can reinvent yourself if you want to.
Yeah, and it can be scary, but it can also be exciting, I think, that opportunity to not necessarily define yourself by your job, but define yourself by what you're interested in, right? And what you're passionate about.
And there's so many places that you can get started at. In every community, there's such outreach for, volunteering, community service, being involved in the community. Find something that you enjoy. You will meet people that are like-minded, and you will figure out what you want to do next just by expanding your horizons and follow your heart.
Absolutely. That's some great advice. Marla, what is on your bucket list? It sounds like you've fulfilled a lot of it. So what else? Anything else?
I want to be an amazing Marmar. I'm not going to be a grandma. Age is just a number. Age is just a number.
So Marmar is your given name, your grandmother name.
Yep, I'm giving that name to my granddaughters, Marmar.
Yes.
I want to be an amazing grandmother. I want to be an amazing mother-in-law to my daughter-in-law. And I want to stay so connected to my friends and my family. I have made some amazing women friends, girlfriends that I've never let go of. And they're as important to me as my family. And I want to include them in my life whenever I can. And if it means me flying back and forth to the East Coast, I'm so good with that.
And also, I'm sure they would like to come visit you in California. That's not
Everybody
too
does.
shabby. Yes.
When you live in a place that everyone wants to vacation to, I hear from people that I thought I might never see again. And I have to tell you, that has been absolutely glorifying and wonderful.
I was going to say that's not a bad thing. I have a rule that if I travel anywhere in the country and I know someone in that city, I'll just reach out to them and say, let's get coffee, let's get a glass of wine. And sometimes they say no, or they can't fit it in their schedule. But, I have reconnected with so many people that way because I'm like, I'm here. Why not? Right. So.
And I will say, as much as I do, and as busy as we are, my goal is to continue with this winery and to build it to the point in which my kids feel, Mom, we just want you to do tastings, or we just want you to meet people. We're
going to take over. I think that's a great plan.
They're ready for that. And I also feel that having the winery has kept me connected to so many people, and I've met so many people. Would you believe that having wine, organizations reach out to me and ask me to pour wine? Yes, of course you would believe that, but I've met so many people through that. And
you mentioned something earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. You were talking about you didn't know you were an entrepreneur until you were an entrepreneur, and you just recently spoke about that. Touch on that just briefly.
I never thought I had it in me to go out on my own. And for years, when I was in the hotel business, my customers have reached out to me, and I handled corporate sales, and my team was also a group corporate sales team. And I had people reach out to me saying, hey, let's go out on our own. We can represent customers. We can do this on our own. And I always thought, I don't want to do that. I don't really believe that we're going to make it, and I'm going to give up a great career because I had such a great career, and I never believed it. But I do now. I believe it, and we can do it. Every single one of us can do something to make ourselves happy. It might not be starting a winery, but maybe it's starting a bagel shop or a coffee shop where people come in and read books. I have a friend who's starting a book club in near San Francisco. She's always dreamed of having a book club. She's starting one. And I'm going to help her come in, and we're going to try to attract people with the wine. And women like to synergize with each other. We're girlfriends, and I don't have as much synergy sessions with the guys that I used to work with. So I think that it's really important for women to rely on women, and there's a whole movement now, right? Women for women, women in business, and
to collaborate. Yeah, I agree. I think to thrive, we need to rely on each other, younger and older, because we learn a lot, right, from the
Sure.
multi-generational relationships.
Mhm.
Marla, this has been such a delight. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and talk to me today. And just thank you so much. This has been great. I've learned so much. I learned so much from you when I met you about wine. And it's been a pleasure learning about your life and your journey. And I think my audience will relate to it and get a lot out of this interview.
Thank you. And I would say the same thing back to you.